Hi everybody, this is Mike and Laurie with Hamburg Honey. Mike and I had done a PowerPoint presentation to speak about at Beekmeet 2024, and this is a slideshow that couldn't really be seen very well when we had done the presentation. So we won't get into too much detail on grafting. There's a lot of details and subtleties. There are many different ways to raise queens. We'll be concentrating on three of these methods: swarm cells to make nukes, the Miller method, and grafting. Well, there are different types of queen rearing equipment styles, one of those being the JZ-BZ grafting method, the Nicot grafting method, and then the Miller method, which doesn't use any special equipment. When should you start raising queens? The first thing you must consider is the status of your drones. While your queens will usually not mate with drones from the same apiary, you must consider the drone status in general in your area. The first on a capped drone brood is not quite the time to start. Drones take 24 days on average to emerge. Then the drones need to be about 2 weeks old before they're sexually mature. That's 36 days from the time you see drone brood. The nukes that you built for your queens will also be more likely to accept her if there's a nectar flow going on. In our neck of the woods here, that's usually around the first week of June. This is usually black locust and blackberry.
So this is one of the first slides that we're showing you guys because this is really important. It really shows the effects of how you graft your queens or how you raise your queens and what quality of queens you get out of it. So the first line you can see it shows 9.4 millimeters. That is the average size of the inside of an emergency cell. Okay. The 9.6 millimeters, that's the average size of a Nicot queen rearing system. 9.8 is the size of a swarm cell, and 10 is the size of one of the JZBZ cups or some of the other cell cups that you graft into. So you really have to look here where the numbers are underlined in red. An emergency queen cell will only have about 200 ovarelles in her ovary, and a grafted queen cell will have about 250. That's really a huge difference. And as we move down these different types of queen rearing, I'll show you exactly what those numbers can turn into. So every ovarelle in a queen's ovary can produce 5 to 7 eggs per day. Okay, a grafted queen has almost 50 more ovarelles in an ovary than an emergency queen cell does. Okay, this means that a queen bred in an emergency queen cell can produce around 1,200 eggs per day. If you compare that to a queen that was raised in a swarm cell, that's 1,430. And if you look at a queen that's raised in a grafted queen cell, it can lay over 1,500 per day. So the difference between a good queen and a great queen is cumulative. A great queen will lay about 9,000 more eggs per month, or about 36,000 more eggs per season. Keeping in mind, a 3-pound package is approximately 10,000 bees. So that is a lot of extra bees in a season. It's going to give you a lot more honey. It'll give you a lot more winter bees. We'll keep talking about this. Why are queens that you raise yourself better than any queen that you can purchase? Entomologist Jeff Pettis of the USDA, he did a study on queens shipped to him. He had people in his lab install thermometers into queen cages, and then he sent those queen cages to producers around the country and had them ship him queens in their normal manner. So they know that queens exposed to temperatures over 104 degrees or below 41 degrees for only 1 hour lost much of their sperm viability. They found that 20% of shipped queens hit those temperature extremes and had lost 50% of their viability. I'm not blaming or putting down queen producers. These guys, they raise 5, 10, 50,000 queens a year, and they do a good job at it. There's just certain things that are out of their control. Um, Also, the longer a queen is kept from laying, the lower her overall ability becomes. After a queen starts to lay, she is caged and then she's shipped out. She's then put into your hive and kept in a cage for another 3 or 4 days. That means she is kept from laying for at least 6 days, bare minimum. This reduces her peak ability if she is not allowed to ramp up naturally, like if you just put a queen cell into a nuke and let her emerge. And lastly, you are the one that is choosing the best genetics for yourself, for your area. Queens that are able to survive our winters are your best advantage for trying to increase your brood numbers and your apiary numbers. The first one we're going to jump into is pros and cons of swarm cells. So some of the pros are there's no special equipment that you need. If you have bees, you already have the equipment that you need. It is very easy. Like I said, there's no cost to it, and you get really high quality queens with this. Some of the cons are you should use wax foundation. You don't have to, but it's a lot easier if you do. It is time sensitive. You could accidentally have your best queen swarm, and that's not what you want. There are only a few splits that can generally be made per hive from swarm cells, and the original hive probably won't have a honey crop, depending on which type of frame and foundation you use, and I'll explain that a little bit more. Swarm cells versus emergency cells. So swarm cells, you can see in this photo, they're usually built on the bottom edges and the outside edges of the frame. This is where the best temperature range is for queen development. The bees know this, so this is where they put their swarm cells. And then also in the picture, we have one cell that's circled. You're going to see these every once in a while when you're doing your inspections on your frames. It's called the queen cup. There's nothing that you have to worry about with these unless you look in there and can see an egg. These are uh, just in case cell cups that they keep built around just in case they ever need to make one right away. And then on the bottom left-hand picture, this is what the emergency cells look like. They're mostly built in towards the center of the frame where the brood cluster usually is. And this is because they're going to build emergency queen cells wherever they can find a cell of the right age. So they're generally going to be in that center area. Now, if your hives aren't quite ready to swarm, you can actually choose your best hives and kind of force them into swarm mode. So what you're going to do is you're going to pick your best colonies and force it down into one box. Most people keep bees in 2 boxes, but not everyone. I don't. But it is easy to put them all down into one box. All the brood and all the bees, just shake them down into one box. You can also shake some extra nurse bees into that box, and you can put several more frames of capped brood into that box. You want that hive as full as possible. Then you're going to place a feeder on the top and put pollen patties on it. You want the hive to be just busting at the seams. This is going to initiate the swarm impulse, and the bees will soon start to raise queen cells. But keep an eye on this hive. The hive can raise queens and swarm in as little as 12 days, so you really have to keep an eye on it. So when the cells are capped, that's when you need to act. You cut the cells out of the wax, making sure you cut a large chunk of wax above it as well, so that you can use that chunk of wax like a little handle, and you can push that right into the frames of the nukes that you're building. That way you don't damage the queen at all. And if you happen to use plastic frames, you can't cut the cells out very well, but you can just take that entire frame out and put it into a new nuke. That's why I mentioned earlier, you may reduce the size of the donor hive, and then you're going to lose some honey production on that. And then after you remove the swarm cells that you're going to use, um, give the colony lots of room. You don't want it to actually swarm. So what you're going to do as well is you're going to take every single frame out of that hive, shake the bees off, and inspect it for queen cells. You have to cut out every single one of them or that hive is going to swarm. The next one we're going to move on to is the Miller method. So the pros of the Miller method are it's still an easy method to do. There is no cost. You don't generally need any special equipment. It'll give you good queens, and it usually can give you more queens than just using swarm cells. Some of the cons are you must use wax foundation frames for this method. Using plastic just doesn't work. It is more time consuming and there's more manipulations required compared to just swarm cells. And you do get slightly lower quality queens compared to grafted queens or swarm cells. Just remember looking back at that graph. That's part of the reason I have it in this um, assembly. The Miller method was developed by Dr. C.C. Miller, and it is one of the easiest methods for small-scale beekeepers to raise queens with very little equipment or time invested. So what you're going to do is you're going to make a nuke with several frames of bees and food, making sure you don't take a queen with you, okay? Do this by shaking 4 frames of nurse bees into a nuke box, then add 2 frames of food, including some honey, some pollen. You're going to need both. And then 3 frames of capped brood. Bottom line is you want a lot of bees within this box. After 5 days, open the nuke up and remove all the queen cells that have been started. Don't just lift that frame out and look at it and call it good. You have to shake every single frame off and really inspect it to make sure there's no queen cells on it. You're doing this because you want to ensure that they raise queens from only the eggs that you are providing them, to allow you to select for the genetics that you're really looking for. The next step will be to remove a frame of capped brood and eggs from the donor hive that you've previously chosen. You're going to cut triangles out of the wax exactly where the line of eggs ends on the bottom of the frame. It doesn't need to look perfect like in the photo here. Just cut jagged lines where the eggs end to give the nurse bees room for drawing out those queen cells. Then you're going to take that frame and place it into the nucleus colony in the center of the frames. So you're going to end up having to remove one frame to give you room to put this one in. The nurse bees will start drawing out queen cells along the bottom edges almost immediately. After that, you're going to feed the hive. Give them pollen patties and syrup. The hives must have good nutrition in order to raise a good queen. So 9 days later, you're going to take the frame out of the queenless nuke that you made and holds the queen cells that they drew out. Brush the bees off of the frame, taking care of the delicate queen cells that line the bottom edges. Then take a sharp knife and cut the queen cells out and leave a large section of wax above each queen cell. Using the large section of wax above each queen cell, press it into the upper part of the center frames in each of the nukes that you're building. Now, a lot of times they're going to draw a lot of queen cells out and they're all going to be touching each other, like 3 or 4 in a row. Don't try to cut those apart. You're just going to end up damaging those queen cells. It's okay if you put more than one queen cell in each of your nukes. The first one that emerges will just destroy the other ones that are left. And then finally, the queen will emerge on day 16. She'll then walk around the hive for 3 or 4 days while her wings harden and then start to go on mating flights. When she's done with mating flights, she'll take about 4 more days before she actually starts to lay eggs. So start to look at the hive for eggs about 14 days after you place the queen cells in.
The pros and cons of grafting. The pros are you're in total control of the genetics that you use. You can graft unlimited numbers of queens, time queen emergence to coincide with a nectar flow. It's the most satisfying way of raising queens, and you can sell any queens that you don't use so it can be profitable. The cons are it's very time consuming. It's extensive time management and logistic planning are required. Lots of equipment and tools are needed, and you must have good eyesight. Grading hives and queens for grafting selection. The factors include queen origins, so where did you get that queen? Age and experience. You should not be grafting queens that are less than a year old and have not survived winter. The queen's health. Make sure that queen has all 6 legs and her wings are intact and she has both antennas. Queens use their antennas to feel the size of the cell that they're going to be laying an egg in. This tells them what egg goes in which cell. Drone cells are much bigger than worker cells. The growth rate, how fast did they build up that hive? And when you get to June, are they making honey pretty quickly? Are they making eggs, babies pretty early, building the um, hive up? The mite count. Did the hive that you're that you're grafting from have a high mite count last summer? Did you have to treat that hive a lot? And are they mite resistant because you had to keep treating them and it didn't help? Are they helping take care of mites? The color, you can also graft for the color that you like of the bees in that hive. They can be yellow, bright yellow, dark yellow, gold, brown, and then the brood pattern. You can see in this picture, this is a good brood pattern. The upper corners and usually the lower corners are where they will put honey in the hive and cap it on the frame, sorry. Um, Inside of that honey will be nectar and bee bread, which is pollen mixed with enzymes that they feed the brood with. And then you'll see the worker brood, which is what you see here. Down in that left-hand corner, that's actually a queen cup. That's nothing to worry about. It's not a swarm cell. They're not, going to be getting rid of that queen. It's just an emergency cup. Um, and you notice there's no drone brood on here. If there was, they would be big and bubbly and um, they would probably be towards the bottom, top, or sides. But you can see this frame of bees has a VSH queen. So there are cells that are being emptied and the workers are removing brood that have a mite in that cell with them. So that's why there you see such sporadic brood on there in the center. So then you will look at the temperament. So when we first started doing bees, I wanted nothing to do with it. It was my son and my husband that did them. And they had bought a hive of buckfast bees from Texas. And every time we got within 100 feet of that hive, they would come after us. And my son got stung on the back of the neck right through his veil. So you want bees that are going to be docile. So you're going to look for a hive that's very docile, calm, doesn't get crazy when you open them, or walk towards them. And then honey production. So you want a good balance of bees and honey. You don't want to, if you don't have a queen excluder on and you're noticing there's brood up in the honey super, um, you want there to be more or less a good balance of bees versus honey. So they need to be building up their brood, building up their um, bees, and building up their honey, not one or the other. And then you want, especially here in Wisconsin, you're going to want a very good winter hardy queen. We usually will try to have a queen that we graft off of that survived 2 winters because Wisconsin is very hard on bees. So A through D, which cell would you choose to graft? A is too old. That larva will emerge before the rest of the queens, and she'll get out and kill the other ones before they can emerge. B, it's not a very well fed larva. It's too dry. I don't really see any royal jelly in there with it. While you have it in a cell, the bees will remove it and won't use it. C is really the best one. It's a long and skinny C-shaped um, larva. D, it's still an egg. You never want to graft an egg. So what should you be grafting? Identifying ages of your larva. So day 1 an egg is laid, and when it's laid it stands straight up. So if you're looking at your brood frame and you see this, you know your queen has laid day-old eggs. Second one is an egg that's hatching. You don't really want to graft that. It's not ready yet to be moved, and it's probably very delicate. Day 4, graft that C-shaped larva. That it's tiny. It's ready to go. It's hard to see, but that's exactly what you want when you're grafting. And day 5 and day 6, you definitely wouldn't want to graft either of those. If you tried to graft day 6, the workers would probably remove it from the cell and wouldn't use it. Choose your best colony to graft from. The traits you want to promote are endless, but most people now promote traits that can reduce the numbers of mites in your hives. 1 week before you graft, put on pollen patties and 1-to-1 syrup on the hive. You want the hive to have plenty of great food to feed the larvae that you'll be grafting. Create your cell builder or finisher. You will also want patties and syrup on that hive as well. Graft only 4-day-old or 1-day-old larvae. This is one of the most important steps in getting quality queens. If they are too old, the queens will be substandard. The saying goes, graft the ones you can't see. Make sure the grafts are all the same age. If you accidentally graft one egg that's just 1 day older than the rest, she will emerge early and kill the other queens. Graft your cells in a warm, dark room. The contrast will help with vision, and the warm, damp room will keep the larva from drying out. As you're grafting, put a warm, damp rag over the cups that you have placed larvae in to keep them warm and moist. Remove the center frames from your cell builder. Place in one frame of pollen and the grafting frame and leave the hive alone. Don't open it, don't peek, don't check on it. You need to wait. On day 14, 10 days after grafting, you can open the hive and check the grafts. Place cell protectors on at this time. That would be the easy peasy cages. On day 15, 11 days after grafting, place your cells into the queen mating nukes. If you grafted 4-day-old eggs, they will emerge 12 days later, 16 days total. In this picture, Mike is placing easy peasy cages on the queen cells that our students had grafted at the tech in our advanced beekeeping class. This is because students, it's their first time grafting. They're not going to graft the exact right age, and the older ones will get out and they'll kill the other grafts. There are a variety of grafting tools you can use to place your larva from, take your larva from the frame brood and put into cell cups. The first one is a Chinese grafting tool. This is the one I like because it has the scoop on the end to scoop up the larva with and a plunger on top that lets you push that larva off that scoop into the cup. The second one is a JZBZ grafting tool. Mike really likes this one. It has a very delicate tip, breaks easy, so Mike goes through a lot of them. The larvae stick to the tip very well. That's why Mike likes those. The master grafting tool we've never tried. You can order one off of Data Interman Lake. They carry them. The German grafting tool, we had trouble getting larvae to stick to these. One end has a very fat, flat end. The other end has a really skinny, flat end. Mike had used a metal file to grind down those tips, and it helped the larvae to stick better to them. So the left-handed grafting tool Mike and I tried, and it didn't work for us because we're not left-handed. We keep this around for students that we have that are left-handed. So in 2020, our dentist called and said they're canceling all our appointments. For like 8 months, nobody could get seen at the dentist for anything. So we went to Walmart pharmacy and bought a dental toolkit. And then Mike took them to try to use them for grafting. So while one of these is flat and works really well, you can use it for grafting. If you've ever seen dental tools, they're very sharp. We were cutting larvae in half. We were cutting the comb and wrecking it. I just wouldn't use those sharp dental tools, but if you find the flatter ones, and they're made differently anywhere, any type you go, brand that you buy might be different from another. So you can try those if you want. It's a little bit cheaper way to go sometimes. So there's other grafting items and luxuries needed that can help when you're grafting queens. One of those is lighted magnifiers. I'm supposed to wear glasses and Mike wears contacts, and he sees way better with his contacts in than I do when I don't wear my glasses. So I need a lot stronger magnification than he does to be able to see the graft. It's also lighted as well, so in those dark cells it makes it difficult to see sometimes, and this really helps. The second thing you really should have is a grafting station. So when you're grafting queens, you're holding a frame in one hand with the brood in it so you can scoop it out. And have a grafting station lets you be hands free. So you can have one hand on the bar with the graft cells in it, and you'll have your other hand to work with to get the grub, the larva put into there. Another thing is the easy peasy cages, queen cell cages. This is really nice to have. They clip onto the easy peasy for JZBZ frames. Um, they're good to have if you want to transport queens to sell, or if you want to give people their own queen cell that hasn't emerged yet, they can place in their hives to emerge in the splits that they put those queens into. Queen mating nukes. So the first nuke you see there, that mating nuke, is called a mini nuke. It has 3 frames in it. It has a feeder in it. It has a small entrance, and you'll be inserting your bees from the bottom of this one. This is our first year having those, so we're anxious to try them. The second one is one that you can buy from like Man Lake, Dadant, Blue Sky Bee Supply. It has a divider in the middle and would hold 2 mating nukes in that middle one. The third one is one that Mike built. So we took a 10-frame Langstroth box deep, and Mike cut a piece of plywood to fit, and he screwed it to the bottom so there was no entrance. He then drilled holes, one on each side and one in the front, to allow the bees in those different compartments to have entrances. So this holds 3 queen mating nukes. He also puts a piece of plywood on top instead of an inner cover because this prevents drifting between them. This works very well. It's a cheaper way to do it. So we'll keep using it because we have them out there right now. We overwintered in it with 3 hives. So 2 days before the queens emerge, you will need to build your mini queen mating nukes. Those are the styrofoam ones I showed you. Frames with wax starter foundation will speed up the process rather than using naked frames. So these queen mating nukes come with empty naked frames. There's nothing on them. So Mike and I took and cut wax foundation, and we melted wax to use as glue to glue those in there. It worked really well. This will give them a head start. Add 2 cups of nurse bees, which is about 1,200 bees per mating nuke, mini mating nuke from the other hive. So you're going to get these bees off of brood frames because that's where the nurse bees hang around. You're going to take those frames and shake them into a basket, and you're going to take a 1 cup measuring cup and scoop up those bees out of that basket and put them into the underside of that queen mating nuke, mini nuke. So make sure they have 1-to-1 syrup in the feeder, close it up, and open the next day after about 24 hours to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be, which is drawing out the wax and getting it ready for the new queen to start laying. If you're using regular mating nukes with the regular deep frames, you only need 3 frames of brood and food for each nuke. So you'd be taking these out of your resource hive, your donor hive, and they only need to be made the day before emergence. You make your regular mating nukes the day before inserting the queen cell because the bees will start making their own queen if more than a day passes, and they won't accept the cell that you put in.
A lot of times when you're grafting, you'll open up the hive that you want to graft from, and you pick up one frame, and it has 5, maybe 10 larvae that you can graft, and then you pick up another one and it has a few. And sometimes it takes a long time to mess around to find the exact frame that you want that has the right number of larvae that you can graft. An easy way to get around this and to get a large number of larvae exactly the age that you need is this deep bee frame isolation cage from Better Bee. So what you're going to do is you take your best queen and you put her on an empty drawn frame. You place the frame in the cage and you place it back in the hive. The workers can pass in and out of the slots, but the queen cannot. So she'll lay this entire frame full of eggs, and you're going to want to leave her in this configuration for around 5 days. You'll have to double check. So that when you remove it to graft, there should be hundreds of larvae to choose from that are exactly 4 days old. This is honestly one of the only times that I prefer black plastic foundation over wax. It is a lot easier to see the larva against a black background than a light colored wax one. Now, there are 1,000 different ways to raise queens. As long as you're going to follow some basic science, you should be able to have fun with it. You don't have to do it the way everyone else does it. One of the first things that you need to follow is great nutrition. So every hive that's raising queen cells, make sure you're giving them pollen patties, you're giving them syrup. You want these queens to have everything they might need and more. And I also recommend putting an additive into the syrup, anything like Hive Alive. I like to use that. It gives them a little extra nutrients for things that they might be missing. The second thing is timing. You want to time the emergence of the queens with nectar flows and high drone numbers. If you're using the swarm cells to raise queens, normally the bees are going to be taking care of this. Otherwise, you can time it when you do grafting. You get a lot better results. So, three percentages of what you're working on. So, if you're grafting, make sure you graft a lot more than you think you might need. If you graft 100 cells, generally you're going to have about 90 that are drawn out and capped. Then when you put them into nukes, you're going to have about 80 that'll hatch, and on a good year, you're going to have about 65 that come back properly mated. These aren't scientific numbers. These are my averages. Yours are going to be better or worse than that. And then last, the health. Make sure you're grafting from only the healthiest colonies that you have. Make sure there's no mites, no chalk brood, no FB, anything like that. You don't want to accidentally just spread it around the rest of your apiary. And most importantly, when you're rearing queens, make sure you follow through. Keep detailed records, mark all your queens so you know where they came from and how old they are. And it helps to use a tool like the Queen Right dial to keep accurate status of your queens. This is a really nice tool. It helps you keep track of things so you don't have to keep notes. You don't have to write them down. You can just mount these right on the outside of your hives, and it gives you a lot of different choices of what you can keep track of. So there's a website, I think it's called queenrightdial.com. Brian from the stream team, him and his friend developed this, and it's a really nice tool. So I would go get yourself one if you can.